I started going to COS in fall of 1976, so I've been a member for a long time. And I'm a long-time resident in this Oakdale neighborhood. Steve and I have lived in this neighborhood since 1982, and we've lived in this house on Oakdale Street since 1985. And I feel like it took me quite a while to start understanding why it's a good thing to really know my neighbors and get involved in the neighborhood. I'm not sure exactly what tipped me over. I think part of it was reading about a community in England called Todmorden. It was a mining and industrial community that had a high rate of unemployment, and some people just got together and started planting food in public that anybody could harvest, and that really captured my imagination. And then I started reading a lot about asset-based community development, where you work with what you have as much as possible rather than think you can achieve anything without outside help. So I gradually started getting involved with things in our neighborhood. For example, I served on the board of Oakdale Neighbors for over 10 years. That's a small neighborhood community development agency. And I joined the City of Grand Rapids Urban Agriculture Committee. A new nonprofit moved into our neighborhood called Amplify Grand Rapids, and I'm on the Neighborhood Advisory Council of that. So all those things have really helped sort of increase my sense of place in my neighborhood. And then during COVID, for a while, it was so weird, like, how can we be neighbors when we're all locked down? I remember a little neighbor girl in the spring when the snow melted. She started barreling across the yard to say, Miss Joan, and she was going to give me a big hug, and I had to say, Shyla, we can't do that right now because, COVID. And that felt strange. We used to always have kids in our backyard all the time, and so now we really don't. Plus they grew up and moved away. But there were some things that were still in our neighborhood to bring people together. One is there's a little free library across the street, and some neighbors and I got a grant from the city of Grand Rapids several years ago. And it's just nice to put books in there. For several years, I was the only one basically who was restocking the library, and now oftentimes I go over there and it's already been filled up. And that's a nice feeling to know that other people are doing it too. One day I was over at the Little Free Library, and these little kids came down the block and said, "Someone puts books in this library? We thought it happened by magic." So that was kind of fun. Another thing that some neighbors and I did a couple of years ago already, we got a little mini grant from Amplify, and we made a little edible oasis, which it's just it's about the size of a porch, a big porch, but it has peaches and heirloom peaches that I grew from kernels, from peach pits, and it's got beach plums and pink currants and strawberries and herbs and flowers, and there's a bench and a sign welcoming people to come in, sit down, or harvest when things are ready. And it's just a nice feeling now to be able to talk to people who said, "Oh, I had some of those peaches. They're small, but they're so good." And now that little edible oasis also has a black exchange. Let's see, it's called a black book box or something like that. It's like a little free library, but it's basically for books by or about African Americans, and it can be other people of color too. And then across from that little edible oasis, there's a building that's been empty for years and years, but will someday soon, we hope, be like a bookstore and a restaurant, and the bookstore will be run by a business that's started by people of color. And anyhow, on that building, there's a couple boards where people could write on and say what their dreams were from the neighborhood. And I always thought that was so neat. I had seen that in other neighborhoods and was so glad when we got it in our neighborhood. And the whole thing got filled up, so now they had to have two. Also, right at that corner, there's an empty lot where an old business was torn down. And a few years ago, a bunch of neighbors made that into, we just call it the parklet. Basically, we built picnic tables, dragged them across Kalamazoo Street, rolled really heavy planters across, and we made an outdoor mega chessboard. And then later, a few things were added to it, like overhead sailcloths to cool things down. And it's been so exciting, especially during the time of the pandemic, to see the parklet get used more and more. Sometimes you see people just eating there, having a meeting or a meal together. Churches have had services there. We've had community, community clothes exchanges. Like this jacket I'm wearing right now, that came from a community clothes exchange just earlier in the summer. So I brought down a whole bunch of stuff to donate, and someone said, well, here, I bet this would fit you. And first I thought, oh, I don't need to get something, you know, I'm just donating. I didn't say that out loud. But then I realized that, well, duh, if I want to really be a true neighbor, giving and receiving and being mutual is what it's all about. That's the same reason we like to plant food in public that anybody can harvest, to be just on an equal basis. So now when I wear this coat, I remember that. And then the last thing I'd like to tell you about is we have a new little grocery store in our neighborhood called Southeast Market. And it was founded by two women of color, one of whom her grandma used to go to COS years and years ago. And the other one is married to a pastor from Elger Park, CRC. But anyhow, this grocery store is the first grocery store in Grand Rapids, I think, that's owned certainly by women of color. And it's really trying to provide good, healthy food in the neighborhood. So they made sure that they could use the Double Up Food Box program, you know, where with your bridge card, for every dollar you spend on fruits or vegetables, you get another $1 for free to buy fruits and vegetables up to $20 a day. And Steve and I were some of the early founding funders of that, so that they could get started for about 4 months of sales before they opened to the public. And it's just really nice that now there's a grocery store again that I can actually walk to. That was true when we moved in here like 30 years ago, and now we can do it again. And that's another place to meet neighbors. Oh, one more thing. I'm always happy when there's neighborhood projects to participate in. So just this past Saturday, there was a neighborhood project organized by Friends of Grand Rapids Parks and Amplify and Oakdale Neighbors and a bunch of other groups. And we planted about 20 trees on our block and right around the corner. And that's important because our neighborhood doesn't have any official Grand Rapids Park space, and we don't have as much shade as a lot of neighborhoods do. So that's why it's important to have trees. And the other part of that project was cleaning up the alleys. And it was just so heartening to see how many young adults were involved both in the tree planting and cleaning up. You wouldn't think that picking up garbage would make people happy, but it really did. And I asked one young woman from Calvin University, you know, when you think of all the things that are going wrong in the world and all the scary climate news, what gives you hope? And she said, just working with other people, like to plant trees and clean alleys, it makes me feel like I'm doing something, and that gives me hope. And that also gives me hope to see lots of college age or just out of college age people doing projects like that, starting grocery stores, planting trees, getting together with neighbors, trading goods so that we don't have to spend money. For me, that's what the kingdom of God is like.